Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me online today. And it's just going to be like our regular class. We'll be taking some notes. I'll be recording the session, and all the stuff will be posted on Luminate afterwards. And if you need to listen to it again, or if you need to copy some of the notes that you might have missed, you will have that available to you. All right. Last class, Tuesday, we learned about the basic background information regarding cellular respiration. We talked about how the process is essentially a type of redox reaction. So we have glucose reacting with oxygen, producing carbon dioxide and water. And most importantly, this reaction is going to allow us to generate up to 36 ATP for every glucose that we consume. And in the process, we are essentially harnessing high energy electrons from glucose, and ultimately, these electrons will be transferred to oxygen. Now, this transfer is not a direct transfer. It's not like you take it from glucose and immediately put it onto oxygen. Rather, it actually goes through many smaller reactions in between. Ultimately, is going to end up on the oxygen. So we learned two important words. Oxidation refers to losing electrons, and reduction refers to gaining electrons. Now, the process of cellular respiration is actually divided into four main stages. We already list this down: glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. The first three steps will be releasing high energy electrons, and then they will be captured by these energy carriers and be taken to the ETC, where you'll use these electrons to make more ATP. Does anybody remember the names of those electron carriers? We have two. They're just a bunch of abbreviation. Anybody remember them at all? You can unmute and tell me, or you can type it in the chat box. I'm looking for the names of the electron carriers. No, nothing? Okay, that's fine. Still a little bit early, maybe. The electron carriers we're talking about are the NAD plus and the FAD. Okay, so NAD plus and FAD are the empty versions. They can pick up the electrons and be reduced into NADH and FADH2. Once again, these energy carrier will transport the oxygen to the ETC, which is located in the cristae. Now, you should also remember that each NADH is going to be carrying enough energy to make up to 3 ATP molecules, and each FADH2 carries enough energy to make up to 2 ATP molecules. I keep on saying up to 3 and up to 2. That's like under ideal conditions. And, things are sometimes suboptimal. They're not ideal in the body. And so you might not necessarily get 3 and 2, but in a perfect world, if everything works the way they're supposed to, then maximum you can get 3 ATP from NADH, and for FADH2 you can get a maximum of 2 ATPs. We also spend a little bit of time talking about two different ways of producing ATPs in the cellular respiration process. The first way is called substrate level phosphorylation. It is not very common. It only accounts for about 10-11% of all the ATPs produced, and it doesn't happen in all the stages. It only happens in glycolysis and the Krebs cycles. And the process involves an enzyme taking a phosphate group from a donor and transferring it onto ADP, and then you will create ATP. And these ATPs are available for use immediately. The second method, which is called oxidative phosphorylation, that happens at the ETC. That's where all the electrons that were being captured by the NADH and FADH2 will now be put to use. And at the ETC, you will be creating 90% of all the ATPs that uh, uh, um, are going to be generated from cellular respiration. So that's where we left off on Tuesday. That was like a 5 minute quick review. And today we'll continue. Basically, I'll show you the rest of the process, and I'll show you where the 36 ATP actually came from. So, take good notes and just like our regular class, ask questions if you are not sure what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's start with the first stage, which is glycolysis. By the way, I mocked your lab this morning. I posted it. Everybody did well. So your mark overall grade should see a substantial boost after the lab. Okay, so glycolysis, this one happens in the cytoplasm. And glycolysis, the word glyco means glucose. And lysis, you might remember from lecture 4, means breaking. Okay, breaks. So glycolysis, we are breaking glucose. Okay, breaks glucose into two molecules of pyruvate. Right? Two molecules of pyruvate. Now, glucose has 6 carbon. So if you break it down into two molecules of pyruvate, 6 divided by 2 is going to be 3. So each pyruvate consists of 3 carbon atoms. Okay. What else? Let's see. Glycolysis has 2 phases. There are actually 10 steps, 10 steps in glycolysis. And don't worry, we're not gonna do all 10 steps, okay? Step 1 to 5 in glycolysis is what we call energy investing phase. Energy investing phase. And then 6 to 10 is what we call energy yielding phase. Glucose on its own is not going to be able to, react too much. And so we have to in invest a little bit of energy. We need to provide a little bit of energy to prime the molecule, to prepare the molecule, to make it a little bit more energetic, and then it's going to react. Okay? So in the energy investing phase, two ATPs, two ATPs are used to energize glucose. Now, you might have heard of the phrase, it takes money to make money. If you invest money, then you get some money in return, hopefully, right? And that's what's happening here. By investing two ATPs, you want to be able to get energy from it, get some return from it. And that's what the energy yielding phase is. Right? The second half of glycolysis, this is where you're going to be kind of reaping the reward of what you have invested. You've invested two ATPs, and in the energy yielding phase, you actually will get 4 ATPs are produced by substrate level phosphorylation, the process where the enzyme is going to take the phosphate from the donor and put it onto ADP. In addition, two NADH are generated. Sorry, got to restart the program. This thing has been acting up quite a bit lately, so I might have to restart a couple times during the lesson. So this is going to be a 2 NADH. Remember, the NADH captures the electrons that are being um, released from the glucose. Right? And so this is a good investment. You invested two ATPs, but you get four back. That's like 100% return. Okay. So we have a net gain of two ATP. Two ATPs from glycolysis. Okay. Now, on a separate piece of paper for you, I want you to start drawing this. This is going to be like a summary. Okay. Cellular respiration summary. Okay. So just keep it this way, and then I'm gonna write down all the steps for you. Okay. You want to do this on a separate piece of paper, big one too. Okay. So we started with glucose, which once again is 6 carbon atoms. And then the glucose is going to undergo the energy investing phase. So you're going to use two ATP molecules. You're going to add it to the glucose. And afterwards, you're going to get to ADP. Okay, so once again, this is, I'm going to put it right here. This whole process is glycolysis. And it happens in the cytoplasm. And this part here that I just drew out, that would be the energy investing phase. And there are actually 5 steps in between, right? Which we are not gonna look at. If you're really interested, if you're dying to know, you can Google it yourself. And then the next 5 steps would be the energy yielding phase. So that's gonna split the glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvate. So that's pyruvate right here. So only 3 carbons. You're going to have the exact same thing on the other side. Now, don't forget this is energy yielding phase, so you're actually going to get um, some energy return. Let me just make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so you're going to get you're going to have 2 ADP coming along, and then through substrate level phosphorylation, you're going to get 2 ATP. But each path is going to do the same thing. So there we go. But that's not it. You will also have NAD plus coming along, picking up electrons that are being released, and then it's going to become NADH. Like that. Okay, so this whole process is glycolysis. It happens in the cytoplasm. Does anybody have any question? Just gonna give you a moment to catch up. Okay. By the end of this process, there are still a lot of energy in pyruvate. Okay? Still contains lots of chemical energy. And remember, we're supposed to make 36 ATP. So far, we only created 4. We still have a long way to go. And all that energy is still locked in pyruvate. And as we continue to process the molecule, we'll be able to make more ATPs and more NADH and FADH2 in the later stages of glycolysis. Okay, so keep this on the side. We're gonna come back to it momentarily, but let's take more notes for now. Okay, so number 2 is pyruvate oxidation. Does anybody remember where this happens in? Where does pyruvate oxidation take place? Look at your notes from last class. Anybody? Don't be shy. That's right, the matrix is correct. Right? So if O2, if oxygen is available, pyruvate, the 2 pyruvate molecules from glycolysis will enter the matrix. Okay? If oxygen is not available or if there's not enough oxygen, then it will do something else, which we can talk about later. But if it's available, it will go to the matrix and then it will do pyruvate oxidation. Okay, so 3 reactions occur. Number 1, removal of carbon dioxide. Number 2, generates more NADH. And number 3, addition of coenzyme A. Okay, so what is this thing? Well, coenzyme A, just think of it as a helper molecule to re-energize pyruvate for further reactions. Okay, listen to me for a second. We started with glucose. We invested 2 ATPs, but then we got quite a bit of returns from it already, right? We already got 4 ATPs back. We got some NADH back. And over here, we create even more NADH. So by now, the molecule is kind of, out of juice, so to speak. It doesn't have as much energy. anymore. It doesn't really want to react further. And so we have this special helper molecule called coenzyme A. It's another organic molecule that will attach to pyruvate and it essentially give it a boost, right? Give a little bit of a refueling, if you would, so that the molecule will react further. Okay. So copy what you need. I'm just gonna take attendance here as well. Okay, so that's that. Let's put it onto our summary over here. Okay, so if oxygen is available, then they're gonna move to the matrix, and we're gonna be doing the um, next step here, right? In next stage in the cellular respiration. And as I told you, it is called the pyruvate oxidation. Right, so let's write that down. Oh, it's not letting me change color. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna have, oh, it's still purple. There we go. Okay, so the pyruvate is gonna undergo three reactions. The first reaction would be removing carbon dioxide. Okay, so when you have something coming out of the arrow, coming out of the main reaction arrow, it means we're removing it. Um, we are going to have the NAD plus coming along, and it's going to pick up electrons that are being released. Remember, this guy's going to go to ETC, right? To deposit the electron. And by now, it's kind of running low on energy. So we need a helper molecule to come along to recharge it. That is called coenzyme A. Now you're going to understand this thing is going to happen twice for every glucose that we break down. Each glucose produces two pyruvate. Each pyruvate will undergo the same set of reactions in the matrix. Okay, so two carbon dioxide released in total per glucose, two NADH here, and then we're going to need to have two coenzyme A. And at the end, you are going to get something called acetyl-CoA. They're just names, okay? Don't get too hung up on, why they're called this, why they're called that. I mean, there are reasons, but we're not going to go into it. So how many carbons here in acetyl-CoA? How many carbons are originally from our glucose? Does anybody know? Have you been keeping track? Okay, it was 6 carbons to begin with, and then you split it, it becomes 3 and 3. And we removed a carbon dioxide. So how many carbon atoms are left at this point? 2 is correct. Very good. 2 carbons. Okay. 3 carbons here, minus the carbon in carbon dioxide, we are down to 2 carbons. So this here is called pyruvate oxidation. And it happens in the matrix. I'm not going to ask you to draw these things on the test, okay? Don't worry. But you should have a good understanding of where the things are coming from and so on and
So,
so
sir,
forth.
it's called pyruvate oxidation because it loses two carbon dioxide because it loses two carbon in this
Because it
case.
loses electron, actually, right?
Okay.
Oxidation means electron, right? And because pyruvate is losing electrons, that's why we need the NAD plus to pick them up, right? To capture it. Does that make sense? All right, next step. Next step we have Krebs cycle. And Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. Uh, this is a series of reactions that occur in loops, if you would. Each glucose molecule goes through the Krebs cycle twice. I'll show you why. Main products, 2 ATP, 6 NADH, and 2 FADH2 per glucose. Okay. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, and 4 carbon dioxide per glucose. Okay, I'm going to highlight this. Okay, when you're ready, I'll move on. Okay, so back to the drawing here. Now, again, these are just names. Don't get too hung up on them. We are in the matrix of the mitochondria right now, and there is already a molecule floating around. And that molecule is called oxaloacetate. Okay, again, don't worry too much about it in terms of like what what it looks like and so on and so forth. It's already there, and it's 4 carbon. So the first thing that happens in the Krebs cycle is that this oxaloacetate is going to combine. It's going to combine with the acetyl-CoA, and then you will get citric acid. Okay, citric acid. That's why the Krebs cycle is also called the citric acid cycle because it's the first product that you get. And this would be 6 carbon. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay. And then there will be a bunch of reactions. Okay. 8 reactions. We're not going to go through it. Okay. It's just gonna react, 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 and eventually, at the end, all at the end of all these reactions, you are gonna regenerate the oxaloacetate so that it can combine with another acetyl-CoA, and then it can just keep on going and going. That's what I mean when I wrote the reaction happens in loops. It just keeps on cycling. As long as we keep on feeding acetyl-CoA into the cycle, this is going to keep on going. How do we get acetyl-CoA? Well, we need pyruvate. And how do we get pyruvate? We need the glucose. And how do we get the glucose? We need to eat, right? So as long as we're eating, as long as we're supplying our body, we're going to be able to keep on turning this cycle. And the purpose of this cycle is to, once again, create energy for our body, right? So what are the key products here? I already listed out for you, but let's list it out again. This thing is driving me crazy. Ah, sorry. So we have um two two carbon dioxide coming out. Okay, I know before you go crazy and say, oh, but I thought it's four carbon dioxide. Just hold on, okay? Just hold on. Two carbon dioxide. We're gonna, release some more electrons and they will be captured by these energy carrier, 3 NADH, and then we're gonna have the FAD as well, becoming FADH2. Remember, these things are gonna go to the ETC, the final stages, right? The um, the airport, so to speak. And we're going to be creating some ATP, not a lot. Okay, and these ATPs are created through substrate level phosphorylation. So that's for one turn of the Krebs cycle. But remember, each glucose becomes two pyruvate, and each pyruvate will create one acetyl-CoA. And then each acetyl-CoA will be doing the same reaction here. Right, there you go. So that's why per glucose, we will have four carbon dioxide, six NADH, two FADH2, and two ATP, right? Which is written right here, right? This is per glucose. If you're looking at per spin, right, then that's a different story. So over here, let's just put it down on the side. Krebs cycle. Krebs, again, is a person, and it happens in the matrix. All right. So that's the first three stages. Now, hold on. I just want to refresh your memory one more time. The first three stages, it's all about releasing high energy electrons, right? Oxidizing the glucose, oxidizing the pyruvate, and so on and so forth. And there are going to be a lot of high energy electrons that are coming out. And so all those high energy electrons are being captured by energy carrier. That's why by the end of these three stages, we have a lot of full taxis, if you would. Right? NADH here, NADH, right? More NADH, some FADH2. Right? We produce a little bit of ATP as well, but it's nothing. It's peanut. Only four ATPs in total, right? The big money is at the ETC. That's where we're gonna get, the rest of the 36 ATPs, right? And that's what I'm gonna show you next. Any questions at all before we move on? Remember, this stuff is on your test next Thursday. Now, speaking of the tests, for those of you who were not here on Tuesday, if you go on to Illuminate and if you go to test information right here, you will see there is a test review package. Okay, you should also download this concept check answer thing right here. It's the study guide. Sorry, it's the question that we do in class, but this one has the answer in it, right? It's all of it. 40, there are 48 questions, right? Which is, good for practicing as well. Okay. So please um, be sure to check those out. Actually, this one covers topic of lecture 1 to lecture 5 and the Beetroot Lab. Okay? And the Beetroot Lab. I'll hand it back to you on Thursday. No, on Tuesday. I'll see you again on Tuesday, right? Okay. Let's move on back to the note. So we did stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Now is time for the ETC. Brand new page, if I may suggest. Okay, this time do it sideways. We're gonna be doing big drawings, okay? That's how you should be drawing it. Okay? New paper. I see what you guys do in class. Well, either you don't copy in class, you just sit there and watch. Or if you do copy, sometimes you try to fit it like in the small corner of your printout. This is not one of those notes, okay? This is a very long, big note, and it's quite complicated as well. So stage 4, electron transport chain, ETC. Okay, so I'll draw first, and then I'll explain, and then I'll write some notes for you. So on your paper, once again, this is your paper. I want you to draw a line, and then I want you to draw these wavy stuff, just like I am doing right now. So out here, that's the cytoplasm. This is the outer mitochondrial membrane. This here is the inner membrane, which forms the cristae. And on the inside, this is the matrix. We also have a space between the two membranes, and you might recall that is called the intermembrane space. There you go. So we're talking about the electron transport chain. What are they? Well, electron transport chain, we're going to draw some and try to use color if you can. Electron transport chains are basically a series of membrane proteins that are embedded within the cristae. Okay? And then the cristae are all folded up nicely to increase the surface area. So you might have, thousands of these electron transport chain that are fitted in the cristae. So that is an ETC. We have another ETC here and another one. And like I said, there are thousands of these within the inner mitochondrial membrane. So let me write it down for you. The electron transport chain consists of a group of membrane proteins embedded within the cristae. These proteins are arranged in increasing, arranged in order of increasing. Electronegativity. Electronegativity is basically attraction for electron. Just copy it down first. I'll explain more in a bit. Okay, so we have three proteins here. There are actually five if you read it in the textbook or whatever, but for simplicity, I'm just going to put three. One, two, three. You don't have to write this. Just listen to me explain. Okay, so one, two, three. Num so what does increasing electronegativity means? Okay, so one, two, and three here. Two has higher attraction for electron than one, and three has higher attraction for electrons than two. What that means is, again, don't draw this. I'm just explaining, I'll erase it after. That means if I have electrons over here and I put it onto protein number one, number two, having a higher attraction for electron than one will grab the electron from number one. Number three, having a higher attraction for electron than number two will grab it from number two, right? And so it forms almost like a staircase. You drop the electron off at the highest step, and then it just bounces off to the next one and to the next one. So the electron transport chain forms a system that allows electrons to flow down the proteins, essentially. Okay? So help me out here. What is going to be delivering these electrons to the electron transport chain? What will be bringing along the electrons to put on protein number one here on the electron transport chain? Does anybody know? Should I not ask questions anymore? Okay, let's go back to here, right? We've created all these NADH and all these FADH2. Their job is to take the electrons to the ETC, right? So that's what's going to be happening right here. That's what's going to be happening right here. We're going to have the NADH coming along and is going to drop off the electrons. And after it drop off the electrons, then it will change back to NAD plus. Okay. And then, there's going to be H plus as well. And then where is this going to go? Well, this is going to go and go get more electrons from Krebs cycle, maybe, right? They will get more electrons from pyruvate oxidation. Remember, it's just a shuttle. Drops off the passenger, it needs to go get more passenger. So that's going to be the high energy electrons here represented by these green balls. And like a game of hot potato, the electrons will get passed to the next protein and then to the next protein. All right. So let me write down what happens to these things. I'll just use green. over here to refer to the electrons. As electrons are passed down the ETC, its energy, remember these are high energy electron, its energy is used to pump H plus from the matrix into the intermembrane space. Right? So we are harnessing the energy from those electrons, and at the same time, we are pumping H plus from the matrix into the intermembrane space. Now, if you're wondering where do the H plus comes from, well, the H plus comes from the NADH right here, right? When the NADH becomes the NAD plus, the H is the hydrogen essentially, okay? And then we can pump those things over here. Same thing, it'll be pumping H plus. Right? Like that. Okay. Over time, what's going to happen is you will have high concentration of H plus in the intermembrane space and low concentration of H plus in the matrix. So think about this, right? Think about it in your mind. Which way does the hydrogen ion naturally wants to go? Do they want to naturally go into the matrix or do they want to naturally go into the intermembrane space? Hmm? Well, if you think about the things we learned regarding diffusion, you might remember molecules tends to go from high concentration to low concentration on their own, right? And that's what they want to do. The H plus being built up in the intermembrane space, they want to get as far away from each other as possible, and they really want to come back into the matrix. Okay. And that's why when we pump more H plus into the intermembrane space, that takes energy. That's actually kind of active transport, right? So that's why we're using the energy from the electrons to achieve this. So all these H plus wants to come back in, but they can't because the crystal is in the way. Charged particles don't go through membrane on their own, right? So to help you understand this, maybe you can think of an analogy like this. Okay, so we have like a waterfall. You don't have to draw this. You can just listen. And if you decided that it's useful, you can draw later. So we are gonna have some water here, and then the water is naturally gonna fall down, right, from a high point to a low point. But suppose we block that by building a dam, right? So this is a dam. And so the water can't go, even though they want to, right? And then what happens is we have all these water trapped at a high point. There's a lot of potential energy in there. And we can actually build a tunnel. And this is what people actually do at dams, right? They build an alternative pathway for the water to flow. And then in that path, somewhere along the path, they're going to put a turbine. And when they open the gate for the water to flow through, right, what's going to happen is the water will go through the turbine and it'll come back out. And at the same time, it's going to turn the turbine and the turbine is going to generate electricity, right? Energy, essentially. Okay? So in this case, in this analogy, all the water up here is like the H plus in the intermembrane space. They want to go back to the matrix, but they can't because the dam, which is the cristae, is in their way. So they are waiting for an alternative pathway to pass through. And so that alternative pathway is actually another protein. So there is a special protein that looks like a doorknob. It actually does. Um, like the turbine that I'm drawing, and it is called ATP synthase, okay, or sometimes just ATPase for short. Okay. It is a turbine membrane protein, okay, that acts as a turbine that allows H plus to flow past, and at the same time, just like the water going through the turbine, the H plus will pass through the turbine and generate ATP. Okay, so all these H plus that we've pumped over, right, the NADH is able to deposit electrons that pump 3H plus over, and then these things will flow through the turbine. It will turn the turbine, and at the same time, right, from that, you will be generating ATP. So ADP and a P, right, from the turbines turning, it will create ATP. Right? So each NADH will pump 3H plus, and then the H plus will come back in and it will be able to generate 3 ATP. Okay. Now, if you are following, then you might be wondering, hey, what about the FADH2? Where do they come into play, right? So same thing, the FADH2 will also come along. However, FADH2 has less energy. So instead of depositing the electron on the first protein, it is going to deposit it on the second protein in the ETC. So in this case, it will only be able to pump 2H plus, and when these 2H plus goes through the ATPase, it will only generate 2 ATP as opposed to 3 ATPs, right? Let me just use a different color here, right? For the NADH, we're able to pump 3 of these. So when they go through the ATPase, they will create 3 ATPs. Whereas for the FADH2, they will only be able to pump 2H plus. So when they go through the turbine, and you might have another turbine here. There we go. Another turbine here. So when these goes through, then you're only going to be creating 2 ATP as opposed to 3 ATPs. Okay. Are you guys with me? I still have to tell you a little bit more, and then we'll be done soon. Any question? Yeah, thanks. See, in class, I can look at your faces and see whether you're lost or not. Right now, I have no idea. It's very challenging teaching online. Most days, I'm just talking to myself for 3, 4 hours. But hopefully, you get it. Okay, hopefully, you get it. So let me tell you a story to help you understand the next point I'm trying to make. Okay. Now, when my girls were younger, they loved going to the park. I don't think they like going to the park too much anymore. But at the park, they love to go down the slide. Okay, and I told them, okay, when you climb up the slide, do not go down if there is another kid down there. You gotta wait for the person to leave before you slide down. Okay. So every now and then, there would be a kid who slide down the slide, but then they refuse to leave for whatever reason. They just kind of stay there. And then, my daughter would be like very frustrated, standing at the top waiting for the kid to go away. And then what happens is if the kids stay too long and the mother or the father would come, okay? maybe not smiling. Okay, they would come and then they would put the kid, pull the kid away, right, so that the next person can slide down. Okay. In this analogy, the slide is the ETC, and then the kids are the electrons. Okay. Oh, I thought I used green for the electron before. These are the electrons. Okay. So once the electron goes down the ETC, they have to leave the bottom. They have to leave the last protein before the next electron can go. Otherwise, the electron is just going to be stuck at the top and have nowhere to go. Okay. So, if there is an electron stuck here, NADH comes along, right? Remember, NADH has electrons on them. If this is there, because this one is there, then these ones cannot get on, right? You know what I mean? And the whole thing is going to be stuck. That's why we need to have the parent. We need to have someone to take the kid away from the bottom. We need to have a molecule to take the electrons away from the bottom. And that molecule is oxygen. Okay, so O2 is going to come along, grab the electron from the last protein, and then it's going to become water. And oxygen is very important because it acts as the final electron acceptor. Okay? Final electron acceptors. It removes electrons from the ETC to allow continuous electron flow. Now listen to me for a second and try to understand. Okay? If you do not remove the electron, if we don't breathe, okay, if we don't breathe, we don't have oxygen, right? And if you don't have oxygen, you cannot remove the electrons from the ETC. Then the NADH and the FADH2 will have nowhere to deposit the electrons. The electron will stop flowing. And if we don't allow the electron to flow, it's like not letting the water flow in the dam, right? And if there's no flow, we cannot generate electricity. Similarly, if we don't let the electron flow, we cannot create this H plus difference, and then the H plus won't be coming back in anymore, and we don't make ATP. So not breathing, not having oxygen means not producing ATP. And a lot of things that goes on in the body, including the beating of the heart, the functioning of the brain, all those things needs ATP, right? So without ATP, we die pretty quickly. That's why we need to breathe. All right. That's pretty much for the ETC. I'm not going to ask you to explain the ETC on the test, but you need to understand the concepts behind ETC in order to answer the questions. Seriously, anything before we move on? Okay, I'm just gonna keep you a little bit longer, and probably like another 20 minutes max, and then we'll be done. Now, this is the PowerPoint slides. It's basically everything I've taught you and today and the day before. There are some concept chat you can do yourself. Remember the answers you can download from Luminate, right? If you got the review sheet, you will know that there are some exemption from this unit, from this lecture rather. So here, this is disruption of oxidative phosphorylation. These are talking about the poisons. You are not responsible for the poisons on the test. Okay, so I'm not even gonna go through them. Okay, so no poisons. Okay, you don't have to study these poison things. I will go through counting ATPs in a bit. Um, Over here, there's a slide. You don't have to find it, okay? It's very straightforward stuff. The versatility of cellular respiration. Even though we prefer to burn glucose, but actually we can use other macromolecules as fuel, right? We can use fats, we can use proteins. And this diagram shows you that the fats can be broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. You should know this already. And we can feed the fatty acid and glycerol into different points of cellular respiration. Fatty acids can actually be chopped down into pairs of carbons and be converted into acetyl-CoA, and then it will continue to the Krebs cycle. For the proteins, there are 20 different amino acids. Depending on what kind of amino acids you have, you can feed the amino acids into different points in cellular respiration. So in other words, like we don't always have to start from the beginning with glycolysis. Using fats or proteins, you can create molecules that are along the way of cellular respiration and then just use them from that point on. Okay. Think of like baking a cake, right? Like you don't always have to start with the raw material. Okay. If you don't want to make your own icing, that's fine. You go buy the, premix thing. Then instead of starting from the very beginning step, you start in the middle step, right? And that's what these things are. Right? They're intermediates. There are things that are along the way. So you can still harness energy from them. Okay, I'll go through this question in a bit. And then this is anaerobic respiration. It talks about fermentation. You will not be tested on this. So I'm not going to teach it to you either. All right. So just skip all these things. You don't have to know it. All right. So no poison, no fermentation for you guys. Everything else is fair game. All right. I want to do this with you. There's a question here that is important. This is an important question for you to understand. Let me just copy it over here onto the notes. There you go. What is the maximum number of ATP that can be produced with 5 turns of Krebs cycle? Okay, so I'll launch the poll. This is way more advanced than using your fingers in class. All right, just choose something. Yeah, you gotta count all the NADH and the FADH too as well, right? Because those gonna move on to ETC and make ATP as well. Yeah, don't worry about F, okay? Like someone's asking me what is F? No, F is just because it's just extra, okay? All right, I only got 4 answers. And that was like almost 2 minutes. Okay, 5 answers now. All right, we should take this up, okay? We should take this up. So, let's see, one turn of Krebs cycle. Okay, what are the main products from one turn of Krebs cycle? Which is why it's important to have the summary here. Right? One turn will produce one ATP, one FADH2, and three NADH. Just one turn, not 2 turns, right? 2 turns would be for our glucose. This is just one turn. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have one turn of Krebs cycles. We'll have one ATP. This is by SLP. And then we're going to have three NADH, one FADH2. These things will go to the ETC where you will do the whole thing I just described to you over here, right? So each NADH can produce 3 ATP, so that's why I'm going to multiply this by 3. 3 times 3 is 9 ATP. Over here, I'm going to multiply by 2, which gives you 2 ATP. ATP produced at the ETC is called oxidative phosphorylation, OP. We wrote it down on Tuesday. And this is by OP as well. So together, one spin, one turn of Krebs cycle produces 12 ATP. 1 plus 9 plus 2 is 12 per turn, per cycle. This is asking for 5 turns, 5 cycles. So 5 times 12 is 60. Okay, this is an important thing to understand. Need to know. So if you don't understand, ask me a question. All right, that's fine. So I'm just gonna spend the last maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes talking about this chart here, and then we'll be done. Okay, so let's account for the 36 ATP that can be produced over here. All right, this is in the study guide, and we have the 3 different stages here. So we can produce ATP directly, and then we can produce ATP through energy carriers at the ETC, and this is called oxidative phosphorylation. Okay. So let's start with glycolysis. Okay. Look at the summary that we wrote. Okay. Look at the summary that we wrote. How many ATPs do we produce directly from glycolysis? Two is correct. Thank you, Manita. Which is right here. Oops. Where is it? There it is. 2 ATP. Right? It's 4, but then remember we invested 2. So, the net is 2 ATP right here. So we're going to put 2 ATP by substrate level phosphorylation. Energy carrier, we are going to have 2 NADH. Right? Just look at the summary. You can see it, right? 2 NADH. And then these 2 NADH is supposed to take the electrons to the ETC to produce more ATP, right? But there is a bit of a problem, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so hopefully you recognize this drawing now. Okay? And this is once again the cytoplasm, which is where these NADH are produced. And the ETCs are like right here, right? So in order for the NADH to get to the ETC, it needs to cross 2 layers of membranes. So that's not unfortunately not available for the NADH. It's too big. It's not going to be able to go through the membranes like that. So instead of going through the membrane, these NADH will actually just take the electron to the border, if you would, and then they let the electrons off, and then the electron will cross, and then on the other side of the border, the FAD is gonna pick them up, and it will become FADH2, and then it will deliver them to the ETC. So there's this extra step here for these NADH. And the reason for it, once again, is because these are in the cytoplasm and they cannot cross the membranes to get to the ETC. So instead, they will just pass the passengers, pass the electrons to FADH2. Right? They cannot pass it to another NADH because when the electron crossed the membranes, it used up some of the energy. Okay, and then these will take it to the ETC, and we will just multiply by 2. So that's 4 ATP, like that. So from glycolysis, collectively, we have 4 ATP plus 2 ATP, which will give you 6 ATP. Okay, try that for the next row. I'll give you a moment to figure it out. All right, how many ATPs from substrate level phosphorylation for pyruvate oxidation? Anybody? We're almost there. How many ATPs? What does the summary tell you? Let's take a closer look here. Do we see any ATPs at all? Nothing, right? None. That's right. So we're going to put 0, 0 ATP. Okay. Now, I also want to just show you again, we wrote this on the board on Tuesday. When I showed you substrate level phosphorylation, it only happens in glycolysis and Krebs cycle, right? Which is why there are none in step number 2. Okay, energy carrier, we would have 2 NADH per glucose. These are already in the matrix. So we don't need to do this transfer of electron. Right? It can go directly to the ETC. So we're going to multiply by 3. 3 times 2 is 6 ATP. 6 plus 0 is 6 ATP. All right, just going to wrap this up. For Krebs cycle, there will be 2 ATP. We're talking about each glucose. So the summary is right here. ATP, ATP, that's 2. 2 FADH2 and 6 NADH. So let's write down 6 NADH already in the matrix, 2 FADH2 also in the matrix. That means they can go directly to the ETC times 3 times 2. 3 times 6 is 18. 2 times 2 is 4. 18 plus 2 plus 4 is 24. And if you add all these up together, what do you get? What's the final answer? The magical 36, right? Which is what we're trying to get. Remember, in glycolysis, in cellular respiration, it makes 36 ATP. And now you know where the 36 ATP came from. Okay? Let's just do one more of those questions. and then concept check questions, and then we will stop right here. Okay. It says hydrogen cyanide is poisonous. It binds to one of the membrane proteins in the ETC and blocks the movement of electron. If cyanide poisoning occurs, what would happen to the pH of the intermembrane space? Hint, low pH is caused by higher H plus concentration. So once again, you are familiar with this drawing, and normally we have our membrane proteins there, and you'll be pumping H plus into the intermembrane space. What they're saying here is we have the hydrogen cyanide, which is going to block the ETC essentially. So if you block all these things, then you will not have as many H plus in the intermembrane space. So lower H plus equals to higher pH. The correct answer is A. All right, that's it. Okay, thank you for coming again. Happy Valentine's tomorrow. I'll see you all on Tuesday for the test review. Okay, and then the test is going to be next Thursday. And check your lab mark. I think it will cheer you up a little bit. Okay, everybody did quite well. Have a good one, guys. Bye bye.